Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Corey Perkins here, and with a new video for you. Welcome to part 20 of What If Stain Trained Deku. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back, relax, you're in for a treat. So, let's begin. Apparently, everyone had been crying in the crowd once the announcement of his death had been started. Izuku's voice grew shaky. The last month had been hard on the boy. No one wanted to believe he was gone. He gave everything to make sure he took All for One down with him, to make sure he wouldn't come back and hurt anyone else ever again. Izuku cleared his throat. He tried to maintain his composure, though his hands trembled at the emotional struggle. There was so much he wanted to say. Sadly, there was so little that he could. The whole country took the day of his funeral to mourn him. Barely anything was open. Not many people were really upset about it, though. All Might was dead, officially in the ground. His mouth curled into a sad smile. The city put up a statue in the center with his name, and the statement, "Heroes will always come, for anyone can be a hero." Tears streamed down his face. The phrase only reminded him of the day he met All Might, and of the day he first trained with Stain. Both days after so long of fearing the possible truth, but both had given him hope. They made him believe that even he, a quirkless boy, could become a hero. School was shut down that week, too. They had lost the #1 hero and a teacher, so they needed to figure out a lot. They also added new security measures after all the villain attacks lately. He took a deep breath to hold himself together. His mom, who sat next to him, rubbed his back gently to try to help soothe her still mourning son. She knew the death would hurt him hard, but nowhere near as hard as it clearly had. She wished to ask him more about it, though she knew her little boy needed time to breathe. From what the teacher said, he very likely had seen things that night that could have heavily traumatized him. Given this fact, she knew a sense of normalcy was needed. In conjunction with that and the request of the teachers, she had begrudgingly agreed to let him stay at the dorms. It had been soon after Izuku had only started to get better. The boy had still been hidden away in his room. It had taken everything in his mother's will not to slam a door in their faces that day when they asked. After Izuku went back, he seemed to slowly get a little better with each day. She was glad now that she had made the choice to say yes. She still feared that day that those villains may come back for her son, and the other students again. Izuku's hand trembled with all the built-up emotion. His grip on the phone tightened slowly. A wide smile grew upon his face. It seemed like a bright light in the shroud of darkness. He had lost his mentors that day, but the words that they had said that night had done so much good. They had inspired so many people to try harder, to become true heroes. Less of the pros spent their time flirting with civilians or looking for fame. Applications to Hero Academia were at an all-time high, and much to the disapproval of the law enforcement, so were vigilantes. There was still much work to do, but this was more than what most could have hoped for. If his mentors could see what came of their actions, he knew they would look down at all of it with pride. A lot of people are afraid because All Might is gone, but with so many pro-heroes taking their roles more seriously, along with kids all around the city signing up for hero academies, everyone still has so much to hope for. Determination filled his eyes, as did confidence and pride. Most had changed their ways publicly due to All Might's words and actions, though many who took Stain's words as inspiration became vigilantes who aimed to change the world. His mentor's once small group now stood plentiful. All of them did their best to save as many people as they could every day and night. Even the odd toga girl had joined them. Izuku only knew this due to Bakugo. The boy had came in one day to class and complained about the freak. Toga had apparently found him on his way to school just to tell him how she would become a true hero like him. She even talked about how she would change the world one day for people like her. Izuku hadn't really thought someone as far gone as the blood-centric girl would be so willing to work so hard to become a hero. He figured more had gone on between her and Bakugo that night. It wasn't for him to pester about it just to learn more, so he left it be. He was honestly just glad to have seen proof that a possibility that even villains could become heroes. True heroes or not, to become a hero when once being a villain was clearly a start. Izuku explained, "Tomorrow, we'll be taking our provisional license exam, since it got delayed due to recent events. There's even a new rule that students need to stay on campus during the school year to better protect us all. I finished moving in a while ago besides a few odds and ends. Some of the students have to finish moving into the dorms too." Then took a moment to let it all sit in with himself as well. "I don't know if this message will reach you, but I wanted to try and catch you up with some stuff finally after everything that happened recently. Bye, Dad. Izuku hung up and lowered the phone. He looked to his mother, who looked back at him with proud yet nervous eyes. I'll be okay, Mom. I promise. He smiled with softness to it. You better, young man. No hero could ever replace my little boy. His mother pulled him into a hug and held it for a while before she let go. Now get going. Don't you have an exam to train for? Izuku nodded confidently to his mother. He gently wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs, then placed a kiss on her forehead. He knew how rough this had all been for her. He felt guilty for putting her through so much. She had every right to ask him to stop, yet she didn't. She instead let him train further to become a hero. He was proud to have such a loving mother who supported his dreams, even as dangerous as his were. Izuku left the house and grabbed his bags with the last of the odds and ends he had forgotten. Some parents hadn't allowed their children to stay on campus like his mother had. Not all parents could get behind allowing their children to go to school with the recent history theirs had, let alone to stay there during the school year. Thankfully for those students, some were still allowed to continue their dreams of becoming heroes. Just not at UA. All Might's actions were enough to inspire the parents to meet their children halfway by transferring to other schools. Given UA's status, most schools were more than willing to accept students from the top school around, especially when the whole world would know some of these students may have real in-person experience with villains. Most of them didn't, but the rumors were still a good selling point for those trying to transfer out. The new dorms were pretty cramped still due to the many who still stuck around. The rule was only 2 students per room. The students were even allowed to pick their roommate so long as they were in the same class and the same gender. Izuku laughed to himself. He thought back to when Bakugo chose his roommate. He had been quick to pick Kirishima out of everyone else. He even made a big deal to everyone why. As simple as it was. He's one of the few idiots here I can remotely stand. Everyone had just ended up staring at him, so he left the room. He had seemed pleased no one argued with his choice, nor questioned it. Ida and Izuku ended up in the same room. Both had wanted to make sure neither did anything too outlandish in the future, like they had for Bakugo or Ida's brother. That, and they figured the other to be a good possible roommate. After all, they had a similar training and study method. Izuku would be lying if he claimed the wake-up calls Ida performed to ensure they wouldn't be late for class weren't getting a tad old. He hadn't been late for a single class since, so that was good, even though he had never been late to a class prior to their room sharing. He and Ida had actually planned on training and studying for the exam together this evening, which he was actually admittedly running late to. Uraraka had overheard them talking about it the other day. She even asked to join, which they happily permitted her to join them. Izuku and the others that had gone after Bakugo that night had been side-eyed a bit for a while after. Officially on the books, none of them had been there. The others suspected otherwise. They had left to save him that night behind everyone's backs. The teacher's comments to them here and there had given enough to cause suspicion and questions to rise up. The tension finally seemed to lift a bit by now. Not totally, but some. Uraraka had been one of the many who had been very upset about how they left without a word to help Bakugo, though mostly due to not asking any of the heroes for help. Asui, on the other hand, had been one of the top people to be truly upset. She had told them such acts were no better than what villains did by disobeying the rules. This didn't go over well for her, nor those who protested against her. The whole thing had caused major arguments among everyone, with little closure at the end. It was hard to tell if she had been more upset at their actions, or how she had addressed her feelings. Izuku at the end of the day was just glad things were slowly mending with each other. The young boy looked toward the dorms where Ida stood with crossed arms. If his face didn't scream displeased, the tapping of his foot did. Uraraka stood next to him and offered a rather awkward wave to Izuku. Izuku gave an awkward smile in return. He felt bad about having made them wait. He felt even worse for leaving Uraraka to deal with the displeased Ida. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted Bakugo. The blonde stared him down with serious eyes. The moment Izuku looked over fully, Bakugo motioned behind him with a sway of his head to signal for Izuku to follow. Bakugo wasted no time after the signal. The moment he was certain Izuku understood, he walked away. Izuku blinked, but sent his own signal to Ida and Uraraka that he would just be a moment longer. He jogged after Bakugo to not fall behind. Izuku's jaw hit the ground at a sudden last-minute turn from them Izuku made. Ida moved to intercept Izuku in order to lecture him. Uraraka quickly stopped him with a gentle grab of his wrist. The young woman pointed to Bakugo, who slipped from view, followed by Izuku right as she pointed. Ida decided to allow them to chat without interruption upon seeing Bakugo. The two hadn't seemed to talk about the night they saved Bakugo. In fact, the two seemed to avoid the topic when it came up around the other. It would be best to let them finally talk it out, then promptly lecture the young man about punctuality. Izuku slowed to a stop in the small clearing Bakugo had led him to. Bakugo looked at his childhood best friend, with his hands tucked into his pockets. Izuku's brows frowned in the lack of hostility in his stance. Even casual conversations had some hostility in his body language usually. But not this time. "You cried like a baby," he said flatly, "towards the death of a stranger, and again at what All Might had said before he was even announced dead." A gentle breeze danced between the two. The subject was about the death of his mentors, not just some random subject. It was about something Bakugo knew was a serious one that was partially about the hero they had both idolized since they were children. "Explain, before I lose my patience." "You stupid Deku." His words were harsh, but the way he asked showed compassion. His longtime friend clearly found it hard to share openly. Izuku wanted to make him promise not to share before he shared the long-standing secret between him and All Might. He knew, though, such a request would likely be deemed an insult to Bakugo. Not due to refusal to share right away, but the idea of Izuku possibly holding such a low trust of him. The two had been friends for so long. Izuku had also risked his life to save Bakugo twice now, so to assume Bakugo would just openly share a secret so big would surely be seen as an insult. So Izuku explained. He told Bakugo about how he had met Stain, how he was trained by him, how such actions led him to have the confidence to apply to UA, and how his actions that saved Bakugo from the sludge villain had led All Might to deem him worthy to become his successor. He explained how One for All worked, and how he had to keep it a secret from everyone at All Might's request. From there, Bakugo was able to piece the rest of the story together. The boy clenched his fist while he took it all in. After a moment, his fist relaxed. His eyes lifted to Izuku's. The momentary rage that had built up from all the new information seemed to die at least mostly down just as quickly as it had built up. The whole thing was prompted by the situation that he couldn't get out himself. The thought frustrated him greatly, though this only changed a few things to the young blonde. Bakugo walked up to Izuku and pushed his fist into his shoulder. Izuku's shoulders slightly shifted back from the push. The two locked eyes silently for a moment. "I will surpass you one day, but only after you reach number 1. His eyes looked serious. "So don't you dare die until you reach number 1, and I surpass you! Got it, nerd?" Izuku smirked, then stepped back from the fist. Izuku brought his own fist up, and then touched his knuckles to Bakugo's. "Wouldn't dream of it, Kachan." He had no doubt in his mind that Bakugo would quickly go back to his shouty self after this. Change took time, after all. His heart warmed at the fact he and his childhood friend could have a moment like this together. Izuku thought of his mentor's deaths. It tore him apart inside every time he thought about it. Their deaths were sad, but truly had caused many great things. Izuku made his way back to the other two. Ida promptly shooed him toward the training grounds. He was sure to lead the way while he lectured him. Izuku let him go off all he wished. During this, he glanced at Uraraka, who smiled softly at him. Her eyes had filled with the old warmth and compassion it had before the fights about the rescue occurred. Izuku happily smiled back with a warm smile. He had missed these moments between the three of them. Things were majorly different since those first days at UA. They would continue to grow even further so as well. This he was certain of. He didn't worry, though. At the end of the day, heroes always win. There would always be heroes to fight the villains. After all, anyone can be a hero. This he was also certain of. Thank you all for indulging yourself in the story thus far. I hope you enjoyed it. Now there are a few things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we have a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of animes. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge of all kinds of series, guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We the Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. Lastly, if you're interested in what we do here at We the Celestials, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 years and up to join our crew. You can sign up for whichever category fulfills your interest by joining the recruitment Discord using the link in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be. Whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits, we're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video. So, thank you all for watching and have a great day.